and sexual.
Now, brothers, you see the staff that George Pell has that's known as a litus, L-I-T-U-U-S. All right, it's known as a litus. That is an offshoot or descendant of the Kemetic staff known as the Crook. All right. In ancient Kemet, they had something called the crook and the flail that all the pharaohs and the high dignitaries would be buried with. Now that comes from Nimrod and his father Cush, or as they were known in Egypt as Narmer, Pharaoh Narmer, and Pharaoh Menes. I mentioned this on a previous video. Cush was known as Menes, right? The name Menes, M-E-N-E-S. It means the numberer, all right? The name Narmer, it means leopard, all right? Because it's the name Nimrod means the subduer of the leopard, Narmer Marad, for you brothers who are into the scriptures and who are going to the Hebrew, right? The name Narmer means to subdue. It also means water or purification through water. All right, that's also where you get the practice of the pagan practice of baptism from. All right, that was a pagan practice. Water worship was a practice of the pagans. Now, when you go into the Gospels and John the Baptist was baptizing the chosen, that was in reference to receiving the Holy Spirit. All right, that was something different, but we'll go into that another time. But what he has there is known as a litus. That's also that's the forerunner of what the Celts called the magic wand. All right, or what's known in the witchcraft circles as the magic wand. Basically, brothers, to give you a brief breakdown of it, as I said, it started with Cush and Nimrod, who were known as Menes and Narmer when they ruled Egypt as a co-regency. All right, they also ruled in Babylon as Marduk and Ninus. All right, those were their nomenclatures when they ruled over in Babylon. The practices that they created that were populated amongst the other nations is spread from them to a people known as the Lydians. Right, the Lydians dwelt in what was known in the ancient world as Asia Minor, but we call it today Anatolia. All right, the Bible calls them Lud, L-U-D, right, or the Ludim, L-U-D-I-M. Now, the Lydians, they were great mariners, and they decided to depart, or a portion of them departed from Asia Minor, and they settled in a part of central Italy, and they're known in history as the Etruscans. All right, I'm going to cover the Etruscans in more depth probably in another video when I go on to ancient Rome and who the ancient Romans were. I'll probably do that in another video. But the Etruscans were a people of science, but they were also a people of astronomy and astrology. All right, and they brought the litus over with them, or the crook, as you say, and they used it to practice something known as augury. All right, A-U-G-U-R-Y. What is augury? Augury basically is prognostication or telling the future by watching the flight path of birds. They would hold the litus or the crook up in the air, and they would watch the flight of birds, and they would use it to predict the future. If they were wrong, they would get put to death. They also practiced something known as haruspex, H-A-R-U-S-P-E-X. Basically, that meant when they would sacrifice an animal, they would disembowel it, and they would look at the arrangement of its bowels and its liver, and they would use that to predict the future. All right, to make a long story short, the Etruscans were the first great empire in Italy, and they heavily influenced the Caucasians, who later on came there and settled in central Italy. I believe they were separated by something known as the Sylvian forest. But the Etruscans, they were the ones who taught the Caucasians, who later on became or created what's known in history as Imperial Rome. They gave them the knowledge of building aqueducts, arches, sewers, so on and so forth. All right. And by the way, yes, the Etruscans were people of color. They were so-called, they were around today, they would be known as being so-called black. All right. That's what they would be known as. They'd be known as being so-called black. All right, but they were a Shemitic stock. They were of Shemitic stock. They were the Lydians, or they were known in history as the Lydians. Okay, but point being, they brought that item known as the Lydians to Rome. Why do I bring that up? Because the Romans eventually used that. They used that staff known as the Crook or the Lydians in their practice when they carried on the Babylonian / Kemetic mystery school system and created what was known as the Roman Church, or the so-called Vatican Church, prior to trying to abduct the teachings of the scriptures and act as if they're representing the teachings of the scriptures. Rome, or the so-called Pope, was known as the Pontifex Maximus, meaning the Great Bridge. All right, the term Pontifex means to make a bridge. He is the bridge or the doorway. That's who the Pope represents. The Pope is the leader of the world, by the way. All world leaders report to the Pope, including the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, all the leading financial families. They report the Pope is the spiritual head of the earth. Okay, that's what he is. But he has to rule in secrecy. Or I should say, he's the spiritual leader of the earth. All right, now in inner London, you have the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and those elite families. They are the financial leaders of the earth, but they still defer to him on spiritual matters because he's viewed as the door. All right, that's why he has the name, or that's why he is what's known as the Vicar. Right, the Vicar meaning he is the fleshly manifestation of the god of this world, that being Janus, Janus. All right, which is another term for Cush and Nimrod. All right, that's why Janus is depicted with the two faces, one looking to the left that has a big beard representing the father, and then another one looking to the right representing the son, Nimrod. They ruled in a co-regency in Egypt. Okay, but like I was saying, that's really what the so-called Vatican Church is all about. In Rome, it sits on the 7 hills. All right, so when the scriptures talk about the 7 heads and the 10 horns, the 7 heads is talking about the 7 hills that the Vatican Church sits on. When you look at the headdress that he wears, the headdress is for the fish god Dagon. All right, Dagon. That is where his headpiece comes from, and the staff represents the Crook or the Lydians, which he got from the Babylonian Kemetic mystery school system through the Etruscans. All right, it has nothing to do with the scriptures at all whatsoever. That's the point. But let's continue on.